All right, let's talk about some watercolor basics. So I have here the paint palette of all of our different colors. You want to be careful of brown and black because they can take over everything in your painting and really mess it up unless you're really careful and use only a little bit that you need. Got my water. Remember to always fill it up only halfway in case it does spill. It doesn't ruin everybody's projects at your table. And my paintbrush. So I always start with watercolor by getting water on my brush because it is watercolor. Doesn't work without water, as we know. And I'm always going to wipe off a little bit on the inside of the cup. Remember, never tap because that just flings paint everywhere. And 30 kids in a room tapping on their water cups isn't the most enjoyable sound. So I've got a little bit of water on my paintbrush. Now I need to choose my color. I'm going to start with red, fill in some of these spaces that I haven't finished yet. So I'm just going to clean out this red a little bit because, as you can see, some of these colors got a little mixed up and we want them clean. So I'm going to clean off my brush of the dirty red and make sure I'm wiping off the excess water. And I'm going to gently swirl my brush around in the red paint to get it on my brush. I'm never, ever, ever digging my brush in that paint because we don't paint with the metal part. We paint with the bristles, the little hairs on the end. So when it's full of paint, I can then carefully, gently paint with the bristly part of my brush in between my lines. And the more gentle I am with my paintbrush, the skinnier the lines will be because less of the brush is touching. So if I go super gentle like this, notice how thin that line is compared to if I press down harder with my brush, how thick the line gets. So I'm going to keep that in mind and carefully paint each of my sections. When I'm ready to switch colors, remember, we can't just dip and mix colors in the paint palette tray. We need to always rinse our brush in the water cup, brush off any excess water, then we can get our next color. Swirling around gently, and then painting it on. If I use too much water, and I go like this to my paper, it'll start dripping. If it looks like your paint might drip, you're probably using too much water. So try not to get any more water in that paint. If it's really light colored, or if your red looks pink because it's lighter, or how my orange is going right now, it's either because you're using too much water or you don't really have enough paint. The more of a color you have on your brush, the darker and brighter of a color, the deeper the color will be. So notice as I'm running out of paint, my orange is getting a lot lighter. Now you can use this to your advantage, or you can just use it as a way to tell yourself that you need to get more paint. Also, see these scratchy lines that are happening when I don't have enough water on my brush? That means I need to get more water and probably more paint. So since my paint is pretty dry, it's kind of sticky feeling when I touch it with my brush, I'm going to make sure I get a little more water on my brush to add to that orange to make it a nice watercolor consistency. See how it's nice and shiny, nice and wet now? That's how you know it's right. Remember that when our paint starts to run out, it's still there on the sides. You just need to swirl your brush around on the outside and you'll still get plenty of that paint on your brush to paint your picture. If there's still paint there, we need to use it down to the last drop. Only when that little oval is completely empty, no paint on the sides, are you allowed to get new paint. So I'm going to carefully keep going on with my sky, making sure I'm not mixing colors, painting carefully, and getting all of my white spaces covered. You notice over here my sky's a little gray. That's because I was using dirty water. So make sure that if your water gets really, really opaque, which means that we can't really see through it, like how you're starting not to see my brush at the bottom. If it gets super, super dark like that, mine's not really ready to be changed, but you may change your water. Make sure that you fill it up only to the halfway point though, or you ask the teacher for help. If you're also wondering about this cool technique I have going on in here with the rain and in the mountains, that is from me letting my paint dry and then adding more paint on top, adding another layer of watercolor without doing too much to it. So I kind of added some texture by adding more paint. So I can show you a little more in these hills. I think they could be a little brighter. I'll clean out that yellow real quick. It's got some green in it. And I'm going to try not to use too much water. Just enough water is all we need. And then we can kind of bring out different parts or just lightly add some lines with the paint to make some more interesting texture going on in different parts of our painting. So I'm just doing a little bit. I'm not repainting the whole section, so I would just kind of make it look the same.